with your host, Cosmon Cal.
Right back like I left something. Miss your hostess with the most, just holding that fire like a roach clip. Your knocker, your nerve, fresh up off of that curve, jelly jam, preserve, Cosmonian, cloud kicker. You dig what I'm saying? Hey, this is, a video that I wanted to just show this real quick, man. Shout out to the people over there, straight up, man. Straight up be doing great work. You dig what I'm saying? His research is top notch. You dig what so I always like to big the brother up. You dig what I'm saying? He does crazy work. You dig what I'm saying? So you always like to big him up. You dig what I'm talking? All the guys who real scholars out there. You dig what I'm saying? This is called Black First Ladies of the United States. That's right. The presidents of the Americas had melanated, brown skin, quote unquote, black Negroid wives. Oh yeah, they lied about everything. Huh? And so it also should come as no surprise when we start to look at them also, so-called presidents. We see many of them are heavily melanated too. Remember the old saying, if you want to hide something from a nigga, put it in the book. We never look at the books. But in this age of Cosmon, you dig what I'm talking about? Well, all things are coming to light, right? Things that are dark are made light, and things that are light are made everlasting. Everything is starting to be unraveled and unfurled, and the lies are starting to be peeled back, getting to the core truths that are usually based at the center of those actions, man. Shout out to the creative gang. You dig what I'm talking about? Peace to the gods and Nirvanian goddesses. All praise is due to the creator of sun, moon, and stars, the one who always was, is, and ever shall be. But this is just more iconoclasm. This is more whitewashing. This is more erasure of history. Always was wonder, why was they so scared of this blackness? They were scared for you to find out that so-called black was actually copper color. Because see, that leads you back into the copper color races that come from the Americas, not from Africa. So it opens up Pandora's box when you start to understand it. They told the lie of everyone being from Africa so they could clear the way for stealing the land in America from the Aboriginals. They call it manifest destiny, the doctrines of discovery. I just like to call it pure and outright genocide. Well, let's go unravel some more mysteries. Salute.
If you'd like to see more, please like, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any new interesting videos. All right, so let's get into it. This video is titled Black First Ladies of the United States. I'm going to show you that these brown women were considered extremely beautiful and they were highly sought after. I'm also going to show you that this belief changed towards the latter part of the 19th century as white supremacy crept its way into the fabric of both American and European societies. I'm going to start off covering the subject of complexion. For those of you that have seen my videos, this will not be new to you. However, I'm going to cover it briefly for those of you that have not seen my videos. I also highly suggest if you haven't seen my previous videos, go back and check them out. Watching them will give you a better understanding of what I'm trying to educate people on regarding the history of people of color. Okay, so let's quickly go over a few words. The first word is complexion. Complexion is, according to the Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, the color of skin, particularly of the face, the color of the external parts of the body or thing, as a fair complexion or dark complexion, the complexion of the sky. Also, if you search for the word complexion on google.com, it states complexion is the natural color, texture, and appearance of a person's skin, especially of the face. All right, so the second word is brunette. The word can be spelled either way, and I'll show those on the screen. However, it means the same thing. According to Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, the word means a woman with brown or dark complexion. According to the Chamberlain's English Dictionary of 1872, the word brunette means a woman with a brown or dark complexion. Of course, I can hear the skeptics saying already, well, complexion means only hair and eye color. According to the same dictionary, the word complexion means the state of being complex, texture, physical character or disposition of the body, hue of the skin, especially of the face. Okay, so I consulted one more dictionary. It's called A Dictionary of the English Language, 1863. And according to this dictionary, brunette means a woman with a brown or dark complexion. Again, for the skeptics out there, the same dictionary states the word complexion means color of the skin, temperament of the body. Okay, so hopefully these definitions are sufficient enough for even the folks that can't seem to wrap their heads around the meaning of these words because they are so indoctrinated with white supremacist lies and miseducation that even when presented with evidence, they continue to deny the truth. Something that I alluded to earlier in the video was the term brunette, which appears to have changed its meaning during the early to mid 20th century to mean only dark hair. This change ironically happens with the onset of white supremacy, which also occurred during the early 20th century. So present day, when referring to a brunette, it could mean anyone with dark hair. However, if that was the case before the 20th century, all women with brown or darker hair would have been described as brunettes. Of course, this wasn't the case at all. The truth is, only women with brown skin were referred to as brunettes. Also, during the same time, ironically, the word complexion was interpreted to mean only hair and eye color, even though most, if not all dictionaries showed the word to mean the color of someone's skin, especially the face.
Check.
It's my opinion that these words unofficially took on new meanings because the white supremacists understood the truth. They saw in books, newspapers, and paintings, etc., how many historically important people had brunette, swarthy, dark, brown, sable, dusky, and olive skin tones. So as to diminish the people with these traits, a propaganda crusade was commenced, and sorry to say, it worked well, and it's still working today. Also, as I mentioned before in my videos, it only takes telling a lie over time to create a new perception of reality. This same concept also changed many people's perception that people with brown skin are not as beautiful as people with lighter skin or lighter hair. I'm sure that's how the phrase blondes have more fun came about. Instead of saying no matter your complexion, hair, or eye color, beauty is beauty, in my opinion, and I hope you agree, one does not have to dominate over the other. What is also ironic is that people with dark or darker skin and hair are still in the majority worldwide. However, we have been educated to believe that we are not as intelligent, industrious, or determined as our fellow lighter-skinned human beings. Anyway, let me move on to what this video is ultimately about. Black, aka brunette, aka colored first ladies of the United States.
Now, why this is important is because they've painted a narrative that they've told us through the schooling system that we were enslaved in Africa, sold onto boats, shipped to the Americas, made slaves, and that's the beginning of the quote unquote Aboriginal Negro existence, Black experience in America. Well, that's totally false. And not only were we not bottom, or some ragtag people from some other land. We were the aboriginals to the land, and in many cases, the upper echelon of everything so-called American, right? So, as always, the melanated woman has been supremely coveted. So, and I think white boys have always known what white boys have always known, and white girls are now figuring out that you need a little melanin in that line to keep it going. Huh? Want to see the next century? Might need to tap in. Huh? Shout out to Dr. Frances Quest Welshing. She told us about the fear of white genetic annihilation. And I believe that is the source of the lie. Can't fake dominate some people if you really was up under them. So now you got to be a slave. Question everything, y'all. Because the first ladies in America, Michelle Obama, wasn't the first melanated one. Let that sink in.
Okay, so most of the evidence I will show you comes from historic newspaper articles. Just an FYI, I'm going to be jumping around a little bit with the time periods. All right, so this first article comes from the Times Philadelphia, and it's dated Monday morning, February 9th, 1880. All right, so it's located under the first column under the heading, First Ladies, Their Rules for the White House.
1880, a year before Owaspie is written. Huh? 1880. Let it sink in.
All right, so we're going halfway down the page under the subheading, The Model of the White House, skipping down to where it reads, in a row, like schoolgirls in a class, stood the wives and daughters of the cabinet officials, with Mrs. President Hayes at the head. That it was strictly official was proved by the order observed in their positions. Just as the departments are ranked, the women stood, State, then Treasury, War, Post Office, Interior, and the Attorney General. Mrs. Hayes may safely be called a handsome woman, and there will none be found brave enough to dispute the palm. A brunette of the purest type, with large, brilliant eyes that conveyed the idea of surface but not depth, like a transparent window that opens into space. A rather low Greek forehead over which is banded that shiny mass of satin hair. If the glossy coronet could be improved by wave or bangs, but the dark, rich brunette complexion forbids this modern fashion, and Mrs. Hayes is an artist in one or more ways. Clad in rich ruby satin and silk combination, the corsage square and low as pompadour invented to call attention to her charms, no fault can be found with Mrs. Hayes, for her dress is as costly and showy as any worn by the celebrated beauties who flourished in the cabinet during the Grant reign. All right, so I'm not going to finish the article because I've read the part that I want you to hear. Okay, so hopefully you saw and heard what I read. The important part being a quote, which reads, "The dark, rich brunette complexion forbids this modern fashion." Okay, so there are two things here. The first one is President Rutherford B. Hayes' wife, Lucy Webb Hayes, is a woman of color. And secondly, she had a brunette complexion that was dark and rich. All right, so just as a side note, I don't like President Hayes much because according to Wikipedia.com, his presidency represents a turning point in U.S. history as historians considered it the formal end of Reconstruction. By placating Southern Democrats, Hayes ended all federal efforts to bring racial equality to the South. In other words, Hayes, who was a staunch abolitionist, allowed the Southerners that lost the war off the accountability hook, which emboldened them to ramp up their white supremacist activities and take retribution on people of color, no matter their social or political status. What is also ironic is that the Confederacy consisted of both men of color and men of no color, aka white men, fighting to keep their Southern way of life, which included slavery. The twist occurs when the Southern white men and women decided after Reconstruction that they will exclude their fellow Southerners of darker complexions who had the status of being white and who fought side by side with them, denying them any favor or privilege. All men and women of color were lumped together and reclassified as colored or Negro, regardless if they had European heritage, if they were Indian, aka Aboriginal to the Americas, or if they were indigenous to the Caribbean. I will be tackling that subject more in depth in a future video. All right, so moving on to the next brunette woman. You may find this one very interesting. All right, so this second article comes from the Harvard Herald, dated February 17th, 1893, page 6. This article is titled The Washington Family. All right, so I'm going to start reading where it states, Martha Dandridge was a beautiful and a Virginia belle. When at 17, she married Daniel Parke Custis. Of their 4 children, 2 preceded their father to the tomb. And when the widow Custis married George Washington in 1759, she had but a son and a daughter. History gives us a few exquisite glimpses of the home life of Washington for the next few years. He and his wife were very nearly of the same age, both born in 1732. Both were wealthy, refined, and of the highest standing among the Virginia.
Listen up. They talking about George Washington, our first president. Huh? Look who he married to. Huh? This is why the Washingtons go on to be black. Many of the Washingtons, you know, are black folks. Huh? Why? And did y'all know that George Washington didn't have any children? The children that go on to carry his name, one of them being Daniel Parke Custis, is the son of his wife, Martha Dandridge, or Martha Washington. He had no children of his own. Huh? They don't tell you that story, do they? Right? George Washington was married to a black woman. Watch this.
Contemporaries. Washington loved the 2 children of his own. There was nothing to mar their domestic life. But in 1773, Martha Parke Custis died, and Washington was long affected with a strange restlessness. Indeed, his domestic life never again seemed so calm till after the Revolution. Martha was sometimes called the Dark Lady or Dark Beauty because of her brunette complexion, but she was both beautiful and amiable. All right, so that's the part of the article that I wanted to read to you. Let's see if you caught these 3 facts. The first one being President George Washington had no biological children. I didn't realize that. The second one was that Martha Washington was sometimes called the Dark Lady or Dark Beauty because of her brunette complexion. Let that sit with you for a second. Presently, calling someone dark anything is considered a negative term. However, back in the 1700s, Dark Lady and Dark Beauty was a compliment. Why? Because most women were a shade of brown, especially the elite. All right, and then the third is that President George Washington's wife, the First Lady, was a woman of color. I want you to know that I found 14 different newspapers from all over the country that carried the same exact story. Why then haven't I heard about this obvious trait she possessed? Has there been a more famous president than America's first president, George Washington? Did this fact just slip historians' minds? Wake up, folks. Look at this picture of Martha Washington, okay? Does she look like a dark lady, a dark beauty, a dark anything? All right, so something that I want you to realize and take away from this is that white supremacist revisionist history not only represents false information, it also excludes information to keep you ignorant. Okay, so this next article comes from the Times, Philadelphia, dated October 17th, 1887, page 2. And the title of this article reads, Mrs. Cleveland's Gowns, the taste of the president's wife in reception dresses. All right, so we're going to skip down to the 4th paragraph, which reads, about the end of the month, it is not improbable that Mrs. Cleveland will indulge in a shopping and dressmaking expedition to New York. She has several fine, new, and expensive toilettes in mind. Her dresses of last season were from her French trousseau, which were then in good style and new to the public eye. Among these, the chef d'oeuvre was her white satin-trained bridal costume, which gave her a peculiar, fresh, innocent, and queenly appearance. Her other becoming dress was a rich ruby velvet, which gave her brunette complexion a richer shade. A very elaborate black dress and train with beaded lace was perhaps the least becoming. An elegant gray gave the distinguished lady also a very beautiful appearance. All right, so 2 things stand out here. The first one is that Frances Cleveland had a brunette complexion that was made richer by wearing rich ruby velvet. And then the second thing that stands out is President Grover Cleveland's wife, the First Lady, was a woman of color. All right, so just as another side note, many of these articles that I will be presenting to you in this video were carried in multiple newspapers throughout the country at the time that they were published. You should ask yourself, if he can find these articles this easy, why can't historians and PhDs do the same? And the answer is they can and they have. They just don't want people to know the truth because Pandora's box would open and the truth might mentally set us free. All right, so let's take a look at the next article, which comes from the Boston Daily Globe, dated May 5th, 1876, page 3. All right, so located in the first column, all the way down at the bottom, the title of this article reads, Mrs. Secretary Taft's Popularity. All right, so this article goes on to read, Mrs. Taft has assumed the duties of her new position as the wife of a cabinet officer, being at home to visitors on Wednesdays. A week ago, she held her first reception, assisted by the wife of General Marcy. The Secretary of War and his wife were then at the Arlington, but this week they have removed to the Ebbett House, and Mrs. Taft received in her parlor at the hotel yesterday. She is a lady of dignified but courteous and even genial manner. There is a warmth in the grasp of her hand as she cordially welcomes a visitor, which the expression of genuine sincerity in her face would lead one to expect. She is tall and has a sufficient embodiment to become her height. Her clear, ruddy brunette complexion, dark hair, and beaming dark eyes at once impress strangers favorably, and her conversation and manner confirm the pleasant impressions. Okay, so first off, Mrs. Helen Heron Taft, at the time of this article, was the wife of Secretary of War William Howard Taft, who we all know went on to become U.S. President number 27 in 1909. Okay, again, two things stand out to me here. First of all, Mrs. Taft was a woman of color that possessed a ruddy brunette complexion. And secondly, she became First Lady of President Taft, the 27th President of the United States. All right, so you may be saying to yourself, well, the article mentioned that she has a ruddy brunette complexion. So to clarify what color ruddy and brown looks like, I consulted Google, and here's what it looks like. To me, it looks like a reddish brown color. And just like the word ruddy means reddish, and of course, brown is brown. So when you put the two together, it's like a coppery reddish brown. All right, so let's take a look at this next article, which comes from the Lamar's Sentinel, dated April 20th, 1882, page 8. All right, and this one is located in the fourth column, all the way down at the bottom. All right, so the title of this article is Notes of News. All right, so it goes on to read, speaking of the White House, Lad and Lassie, a Washington correspondent says, Nellie Arthur is a dark-eyed girl of 10 with a brunette complexion and very dark brown hair, worn short. The president's children do not resemble him except in the color of their eyes, they being dark brown without being black. Alan Arthur's eyes possess a dreamy softness that would be noticed if he were the son of a beggar, instead of the only son of a president. Well, as you saw and heard, President Chester Arthur's daughter had dark eyes, brunette complexion, and very dark brown hair. Obviously, these are all three distinct categories. You'll also notice that the correspondent stated that the children did not resemble their father, except in eye color. This leads me to believe that his son, Alan, also had a brown complexion. And this also implies that the First Lady, Nell Arthur, probably had a brunette complexion, because if you didn't get the complexion from dad, obviously you got it from mom. All right, so moving right along to our next article, and this one comes from the Boston Daily Globe, dated January 22nd, 1881, page 6. All right, so this article is located in the fourth column under the main title, Ladies Land League, then down to the subtitle, An Elderly Lady. All right, so it goes on to read, clad in a plain but neatly fitting suit of black silk. In appearance, she was about 40 years of age, although in reality, many years beyond that number had passed over her head. Her tread as she entered the room was as light and elastic as that of many a maiden of 17 summers, and but for her snow-white locks and for the few soft lines, visibly upon her fair brow, one might well call her a young woman. Her companion was much younger and of a far different appearance. Her dusky hair and brunette complexion contrasted sharply with the fair face and white locks of the elderly lady, who is none other than the mother of the man who, within a brief period of time, has aroused the world and made England tremble. She is the mother of Charles Stewart Parnell, and her companion was Miss Ellen Ford of New York, sister of the editor and publisher of the Irish World. To a casual observer, these two ladies possess nothing in common but their interest and their labor. All right, so I'd like to bring your attention to several items here. First, the article states that the young woman had a far different appearance than the older woman. And also, the younger woman had dusky hair and a brunette complexion, contrasting sharply with the fair face and white locks of the elderly lady. Another point is that the younger woman is Miss Ellen Ford of New York, sister of the editor and publisher of the Irish World. The article also states, to the casual observer, these two ladies possess nothing in common but their interest and their labor. Obviously, that's because one has a dark complexion and the other one has a fair or light complexion. Okay, so I know you caught the fact that Miss Ford, with the brunette complexion, born in Ireland, was the sister of the editor and publisher of the Irish World newspaper. As I mentioned in some of my previous videos, many of the Irish were brown or dark-skinned. All right, so this is my 7th article, and this one is from the Burlington Hawkeye newspaper dated September 11th, 1887, page 5. All right, so this one's located in the 6th column under the heading Notes for Women. Halfway down the page, it reads, Nellie Grant's daughter, little Vivian Sartoris, is a beautiful child, playing on the beach at Long Beach with her maid the other day. She was a picture of attractive childhood, delicate, quick, and intelligently American rather than robustly English. She is not in the least like her father, but inherits her mother's eyes, brunette complexion, and shapely hands with a hint of General Grant about the forehead and rather prominent ears. Mrs. Sartoris dresses her with great taste, and the child is an unaffected, happy-looking creature. I saw a pretty incident, by the way, before I took my eyes off her. A lady with 2 children a little younger than Vivian, chubby creatures both, passed near the child and said something to her little people which evidently interested them very much. The tots looked at each other a minute, then ran up to General Grant's granddaughter and emptied the treasure stones and shells they had picked up in their walk into a dainty straw basket that she carried. They trotted away without saying a word. Okay, so several things stand out in this article. Just for your information, Ulysses Grant was a Union Army general and the 18th President of the United States. And Nellie Grant is General Ulysses S. Grant's daughter. And then little Vivian, who is Nellie's daughter, is not like her father, but inherits her mother's eyes, brunette complexion, and shapely hands. Vivian also has a hint of General Grant about the forehead and ears. Also, both General Grant's daughter and granddaughter are women of color. So if Nellie had a brunette complexion, it stands to reason that General Grant or his wife also was a person of color. Well, hey, let's find out which parent it was. If you guessed First Lady Mrs. Julia Dent Grant, you are correct. All right, so let's quickly look at an article that reveals the First Lady's complexion. And this article is from the Janesville Gazette, dated January 7th, 1876, page 2. And this article starts off on the first page where it's describing a White House reception. And then it goes on to the second page, of course, down to the third paragraph, first column, and it reads, Mrs. Grant wore black velvet over a canary-colored silk underskirt made and trained. The velvet reached to the bottom of the skirt, front and back, and cut up almost to the waist on the sides, leaving the silk-like side gores in the velvet, the latter trimmed with heavy black lace. The corsage was high, of velvet, with elaborate trimmings of silk. The effect of these colors was very beautiful and becoming to her brunette complexion. She wore diamond ornaments and her hair quite plain, in puffs. You must know that the president's wife is subject to much criticism on such occasions, but on this day, the comments were universally favorable, and it was conceded by all that Mrs. Grant had never been more tastefully and becomingly attired. All right, as you heard and saw, the writer states, and I quote, the effect of these colors was very beautiful and becoming to her brunette complexion. All right, the other thing that stood out to me is when the writer mentioned that Mrs. Grant wore her hair plain in puffs. So I went ahead and I Googled hair puffs and clicked on images, and this is what I got. Interesting, wouldn't you say? All right, so let's take a look at this next article, and this one is from the Rock Island Argus newspaper dated December 6, 1882, page 2. All right, so this one is located in the third column under the heading Our Girls, and it looks like it was from the New York Tribune. It basically looks like a reprint from the Tribune. And it goes on to read, did you ever see such pretty things as the boarding school girls of New York? They sally out to walk every afternoon, rosy with the strong airs of this low, nice island, demure as nuns and representatives of all places. But the native New York types prevails with its brunette skin, gray eyes, height of figure, almost manly countenance and carriage, and well-turned feet. The Philadelphia girls have gentler, more submissive faces. The Boston girls have more beans in their skin and culture in their scrawn. The Baltimore girls have lost their old reputation and prettier faces are now seen in Washington. Beauty in the West is very poorly organized and too corn-fed, but there is a thing called style about these Manhattan belles, which makes every one of them the model for a goddess of liberty. All right, so looking at this article, I can glean several important things. First of all, it's 1882, and they're speaking about a major metropolitan area of our country. And the author obviously feels strong ties to his city. He refers to these girls as the native New York type, like they are the standard of beauty. He describes these prototype girls as having brunette skin and gray eyes. At the end, he says, but there is a thing called style that these Manhattan belles, which makes every one of them the model for a goddess of liberty. And just for clarification, the word belles, I looked it up according to Google Dictionary. It means a beautiful girl or woman, especially the most beautiful at a particular event or in a particular group. All right, so I'm just trying to show you here that women with brunette complexions, AKA brown complexions, were highly sought after. All right, we're getting down to the end here, and this article here is from the Chicago Daily Tribune, dated April 12th, 1874, page 6. All right, and it goes on to read, the New York Sun says the First Universalist Church of Jersey City have called the Reverend Phoebe A. Hannaford to preach for them for 3 years. She began her labor yesterday. She has taken a house in Summit Avenue, and on the 1st of May will fit up and throw open the hospitable doors of her personage. The Reverend Phoebe A. Hannaford has a son in college, a daughter of 11 years who lives with her, and a husband who is a physician in Boston. She has a clear voice and a distinct articulation, is thoroughly feminine, yet preponderantly intellectual. She is of medium size, has rich brown hair and eyes, broad forehead, and a brunette complexion. In the pulpit, she has the firm attitude, free gesture, and fluent delivery of a practiced speaker. Okay, so what can we learn from this article? First of all, this is a woman that was an established reverend. Second, she had a son in college and a husband that was a physician in Boston. She was of medium size, rich brown hair and eyes, broad forehead, and a brunette complexion. I like to hammer home the point that brunette is a skin color, not generally used to describe hair and eyes. The writer mentioned that she had rich brown hair and eyes and added complexion as a separate category. Well, this is the last article I'm going to share on this video. Not that I don't have many more. However, I believe this one makes an interesting point regarding how people of color were perceived and valued at this time in history. All right, so this article comes from the Richmond Daily Dispatch, dated December 27th, 1865. All right, so it goes on to read, a popular societal fad in New York is to have books bound in colors to harmonize with the complexion or dress of the reader. One wealthy belle has had Shakespeare bound in brilliant red because it adds to the richness of her brunette complexion, while a blue-eyed damsel reads Tennyson from a becoming cover of blue and gold, Atlanta Constitution. All right, so it looks like this one is a reprint from the Atlanta Constitution newspaper. All right, so what really sticks out to me in this article is that it's 1865. The South has just lost the Civil War, and according to present historians, Southerners were not too happy with brown-skinned people at that time. Again, I mentioned present historians say this. Yet this article speaks about a wealthy belle who coordinates her book covers to complement the richness of her brunette complexion, aka brown complexion. Remember, I find this intriguing because this newspaper article was printed in the South in 2 Southern newspapers. If we were going to believe current historians, what would Southerners right after the Civil War in 1865 care about brown women of wealth matching their complexions to coordinate with their book covers? Something just isn't right if you believe the history that we've been given. So I want to reiterate what I've been preaching in my other videos. People with brown skin prior to the early 1900s were not ostracized. They were the norm and they were considered beautiful. And also something else that I've said previously is that many brown skinned people were considered white because they had European lineage. What's funny, but not funny, is that now while researching for the last few years, there are articles that explain and theorize that maybe early Europeans had dark skin, like the Cheddar Man articles and a few similar articles. Now I'm seeing websites regarding Caucasians and how Caucasians generally have pale skin, but they can also have yellow or brown or dark brown skin. What I believe is happening is that white historians and non-melanated researchers are realizing that people are finding the real historical information in books, journals, newspapers, and other sources and broadcasting the information for all to see. They have to now come up with a new spin on the white race to include people of color. Otherwise, the fake, misleading historical lies will be exposed. What a pathetic and cowardly excuse to keep the racist revisionist history going. If there were these brown-skinned Caucasians that some are claiming now, where are they depicted in paintings, photos, engravings, etc.? The brown-skinned people in history I'm telling you about and showing you evidence of were the first ladies of presidents and the wives of important men. These women were not second best. They did not play second fiddle. They were not only chosen by their husbands, but in the case of these first ladies, they were also chosen by the American people. These women, like the brown-skinned women you and I know today, are now called people of color, blacks, or African Americans. Maybe that's why white supremacy took hold in the late 19th century, because people of color were generally the chosen ones, and the non-melanated people, aka white people, were the exception. Also remember, skin color was the variable used since the late 19th century to discriminate. Now, all of a sudden, white supremacists and their enablers are being inclusive? Give me a freaking break. So anyway, I really hope you were genuinely surprised with some of the revelations that I shared in part 1 of this video. Part 2 of this video will be coming soon, and it will cover beautiful brunette women of Europe. There will be some definite shockers in that video as well, so stay tuned. Hey, if you haven't subscribed, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos.
That's why I tell you they always lie, and that they lied about everything. This is why you can't trust nothing, man. Accept nothing at face value. You dig what I'm talking about? Do your due diligence on everything. You dig what I'm saying? But with that, I need you to breathe in. Let that light in. Because I'm Cosmon, and I'm out.
Yeah, the game coming, creative king coming. Turning up the light and watching boys start running. Let me tell you something, we ain't out here doing nothing. I can tell you scared, boy, niggas stop fronting. It was all in the plan.
Creative gang is crazy. Boy, y'all better pay attention.
We fight as a single, impenetrable unit. That is the source of our strength.